Hello and welcome to Dyslexia Explored. I'm Darius Namdaran, your host, and today we've got a guest who is deeply embedded within the world of dyslexia and assistive technology, runs a company called Aventido, and I've got a relationship with Aventido in that they become a distributor of IVI, and I really want to understand the dyslexia story of Antony and what brought him to all of this. So Antony, it's really great to have you here.
Pleasure to be here, Darius. Thank you for inviting me. Really kind.
So, Antony, you are the CEO of Aventido, which is an assistive technology company in not just the UK, but around the world. So, could you tell us a little bit about what you do before we get stuck into your story?
Yeah, be delighted. Thank you. So myself and my business partner, Mats, we founded Aventido 8 years ago now with the vision of helping new and emerging assistive technologies to get to market. There's a lot of fantastic ideas being developed and a lot of inspirational individuals sort of creating these solutions to problems that they can see being on the ground as trainers or assessors or people with these conditions. But the next step in that journey of actually getting these things into the hands of people who would benefit from them is a big leap. So based on I think we both have about 25 years each within the industry, and through that sort of connections into the reseller communities, the sort of recommendation organizations, government funding streams, and so we sort of took all of that and we offered that service to those emerging technologies. Through that, we then were approached by overseas companies who were interested in seeing what they could achieve in the UK market and bring their solutions here to us. And conversely, the clients we're working with also want to take their solutions overseas. So now we work in North America, Canada, USA, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, France, Spain, and clients from all over the globe, which makes life very interesting and very enjoyable.
Brilliant. So you've been part of that. I've been part of that journey. You picked us up and as IVI as an app and guided us through that whole process. And now we're being recommended by the government for Disability Students Allowance, DSA. In the UK is a grant that students with dyslexia or ADHD or any other kind of condition that affects their ability to learn and they need assistance to overcome that, the government gives that as part of their grant.
Indeed, it's I think one of the jewels in the crown of the UK in terms of reasonable adjustments. It is a non-repayable grant, so it's there to sort of to fund the students to study on a par with their peers. Yeah, fantastic. Initiative has been around for many, many years. It's not as widely known about as we might like. Almost akin to Access to Work, another great scheme for enabling sort of people to get into and remain in the workplace. But very pleased to say that IVI Notes is being recommended under both those schemes at the moment, which is great to see.
Yeah, so let's get stuck into your story. So do you have dyslexia yourself?
No. As a child, I did struggle with a number of learning difficulties, but no, dyslexia not amongst them.
Okay. What learning difficulties did you have as a child?
When I was 6, 7 years old, two things really affected me. One is my vision. It wasn't picked up that I had bad vision, and I was sort of commonly unable to follow what was going on the blackboard. It's a long time ago when we did have blackboards. And also I had a hearing infection, so I had my left eardrum replaced. So through not being able to see very well, not being able to hear very well, and being a young lad with far too much energy, I very often ended up being the disruptive influence in the class and was treated as such. And it was only through the intervention of a man who now I sort of think back on very, very fondly. I may not have done at the time. He was my teacher at the time, Mr. Heath. And he's the one who spotted that sort of, it wasn't that I was unable to keep up. And when I was engaged, I was sort of there with the rest of them. So he's the one who sort of got me my first optician's appointments and also sort of guided me through the remedial work that I had to go through to catch up because I got so far behind with my studies. And he's the man who inspired me really to sort of get into science, which was my sort of pet love back then, and dinosaurs and space. And that was kind of my vision. And I think at that point, I think I must have had a sense of, okay, this is, moving on. I'm getting a grip on sort of my academic side of life. And I then decided that, I really, really wanted to go and do A-levels because that was something my family sort of didn't really do at that stage. And that was, already in my head at that point. And then I was fortunate enough to then get good enough grades to go on to Swansea University and study maths, which I was incredibly grateful for. And that was then the advent of computers. Literally, I remember very, very well sort of the first home computer of one of my colleagues, one of my fellow students in his room doing computer science. And that was, the beginning for me of that sort of revolution around sort of what computers could achieve, which then took me into my working life.
Fantastic. So it's surprising how something as simple as an optician's appointment and a hearing test and so on can transform a person's life. And I think so often there are many difficulties, small difficulties that cause a huge challenge that can be resolved. What woke you up to dyslexia? So, so you've got a real interest in assistive technology now, technology and the assistants and so on. What got you into understanding dyslexia? What was the wake-up call for you?
I think following my experience, say primary school, going into secondary school, I was very, very fortunate to have some great teachers who kept me focused. That I don't have it in me to be a teacher. And I think I was kind of inspired by those sort of fantastic individuals. But I knew that wasn't me, that I'm not built that way. And that was kind of something that was always, I think, sort of something I wanted to get back to, but I didn't know how. I went through a number of different jobs. I worked for an interior design company. I worked in a clothing chain. I worked in all sorts of different roles. But I ended up in an IT company, specializing in sort of home computers and networks for companies and all the sort of the big stuff back sort of 25 years ago. And it was a complete star-crossed moment. I actually was answering the phones in the office one lunchtime, and this lady I was talking to immediately, as soon as I picked up the phone, it gave me an uncontrolled ear bashing about something that somebody hadn't done. And I was, okay, well, right. And it turned out she was from the Royal National College for the Blind. Her name was Karen Ball. And she was the assessment centre manager conducting disabled students' allowance needs assessments. And we sort of had a nice chat. We sort of understood, so, right, tell me what you need. How can I solve this? We were back to square one, and we helped just one individual student who was receiving the disabled students' allowance at the time, who'd been diagnosed with dyslexia, and he'd received a list of recommendations. But at that point of the disabled students' allowance, you then had to go off and purchase all the individual items yourself, bring them all back together and install them on your computer. It's not like now where you can install pretty much anything on any computer. This had to be installed in the right sort of orders. You had to have the right sound cards, the right graphics cards. You had to, do all the correct activations in the right order and all the permissions to get everything to work. And this chap had obviously struggled heavily to do that. So through that, we sort of helped this one student. And then Karen, who later became a fantastic friend, came back and said, I've got another student. And so we helped her. And then this kind of grew. And that was really my introduction to how assistive technology can help people with many, many impairments and conditions. And dyslexia was kind of the one that always fascinated me, I think, at the time, purely because of the, it's very much a sort of, one size fits one. It affects everybody in different ways. It has different impacts. People develop different coping strategies. They benefit better from different types of reasonable adjustments. And through that, we started building our knowledge back in the day. That was at Woven Business Systems. And that's where I met Matt. We were colleagues. That all grew through that. And sort of through that, we started just at that point developing the systems there in Hereford. If anybody knows Herefordshire, lovely place. And that then grew from there. It was actually Cambridge. We were then contacted by another assessment centre for the DSA. We said, can you help our students? And then it started to grow from there. And that's when we discovered things like access to work. These things were just such, I wouldn't say they're well-kept secrets, but they just weren't well publicised, and people weren't benefiting from the support they could have been doing. I think the crunch moment for me, though, was, okay, we got to a point where we could provide the assistive technology, make sure it was all installed on the computer. But it was the next step, really. It was the training. How do you teach students to really embed this assistive technology into their daily lives? How do you adopt this? Because very often these individuals are already working harder than their peers because of their challenges and their difficulties. You're then saying, I need you to learn another piece of assistive technology, which is going to involve even more work. So you're finding the additional energy levels and enabling, to go through that coaching process, that training process, say, okay, in the short term, you are going to have to sort of, put in that additional effort again. But as you come down the other side, it will sort of enable you to sort of, to save energy and to work more effectively and to build those things in. So we started developing the services that went around the package, because giving you the AT is great, But if you don't know how to use it, some of the strategies aren't obvious. Things like note-taking solutions. If you get a copy of the presentation in advance, you can prepare yourself for that lesson, that lecture, and you can understand before you go in. You've got a much better idea of how then to sort of absorb the information that you want to capture. If you don't know to do that, would you jump to that conclusion? There's lots of little examples. So yeah, we built on the training, we built on the warranty and support. We commonly found that students were accident prone, or they were forgetful or disorganized. So if there were an issue, to actually get support from the warranty for the computer or the warranty for the printer or support for a particular piece of software. So we just created a holistic package that gave them a one-stop shop solution, as did other companies. I'm not going to take all the credit for that. And we developed that and took that forward and created service level agreements and a national body to help bring all that together.
Wow. So when did the DSA start? So you started, that's about 25 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. Was that round about when the DSA started then?
It had been around for a couple of years, and I think it's been an interesting growth. When my first sort of introduction to the DSA is when people, it was not common to have your own computer. Therefore, providing a computer and the assistive technology that works alongside it as a whole package was, pretty revolutionary. But it wasn't well publicized, and it was managed through the 160 local authorities rather than one central sort of overarching body, which we now have in the Student Finance England Student Loans Company. And it was very disjointed. So yeah, it's been an interesting sort of growth over the years. This is back when we were doing desktop computers and CRT monitors. And, if you've got a 17-inch CRT monitor, that was a big thing. Obviously moved a long way to the LEDs and laptops we have now.
So, so let's just put it into context. So a lot of our listeners are in America or Australia as well as in the UK. So to just give you a bit of an overview here. So the government decided that some students were having challenges in university because of their different disabilities and conditions. Dyslexia was identified as one of them, as well as hearing difficulties, sight difficulties, whatever. And they would give you the technology that would enhance your learning experience. And that involved getting a laptop and software and some training.
Yes.
And that started 25 plus years ago. I mean, this is surprising for a lot of people because they're like, gosh, this is amazing. I've never heard of this before. I understand that Canada has a similar kind of system now. Is that right?
They do. I don't know a huge amount about their system over there, but yeah, I think whether it was sort of they took note of what we were doing in the UK. We have tried in the past to sort of promote what the UK government have done around that to overseas countries, territories. But yeah, Canada, I got to say, are doing a great job. And some of the individual states in the US also are sort of, very much enlightened when it comes to provision of those reasonable adjustments.
Fantastic. So you've basically kind of grown up with the system over the last 25 years. So each time a small problem or a big problem for one individual has arisen, you've gone in and solved it and then tried to solve it for other people. And gradually each issue, you've built up this solution.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, we are, as Aventido, we are a distributor of assistive technology, but we also market it and we promote it and, raise the awareness of it. One of the things that myself and Matt have always tried to do as well is, without wishing the same pressure, but is to give back. Very early in my AT career, got involved with the British Assistive Technology Association, firstly helping the value-added resellers to sort of be part of that and to build a community. And as we mentioned, to develop our own service level agreements to make sure that we were delivering an excellent level of service, way above and beyond what you would get from a standard reseller of IT when it comes to assistive technology. And that sort of flowed on to joining the board of BATA, becoming the chair for, I think, about 5 years. And also then sort of very fortunate then to make some international sort of contacts as well. And we then formed the European Industry Association for Assistive Technology, which I'll be honest was inspired by our friends over in the US. We were, as Europeans, attending ATIA, which is a fantastic conference. And we were seeing all the great stuff and the great conversations and, the literal thousands of people coming together to talk best practice and new interventions and everything that was going on over there. And, to build their knowledge and their understanding. We kind of thought, okay, it's great to come to Orlando in February. This is a wonderful thing. But this is something that, we in Europe can learn as well. So we've put together that organization and growing that now, hopefully in, the same vein that we will be able to share, all that best practice and insights, hopefully close to home.
So really interesting to see that sort of overview of how you kind of became aware of dyslexia, and it's through the assistive technology needs. How much does it actually help, do you think? Like what difference has assistive technology made to students' lives have you seen over the last quarter of a century now?
It's transformative without any hesitation. There are the challenges of dyslexia itself. There are the challenges of maintaining energy and enthusiasm when you're working very often sort of harder than your peers. And with the right assistive technology, and I always sort of bark on about this, but with the right training and support, it is transformative. It has enabled many, many, many people to use their skills, their qualities, their ambitions, and to achieve things that otherwise, I'm not saying they would not have achieved, 'cause that's not the case, but would have required so much more hard work and effort and burnout and everything else that goes with that. So yeah, I think, say I'm doing this for something like 25 years and I've never got bored. The industry changes, the technology changes, but that sense of achievement never goes away. So yeah, it's an industry I'm honored to be part of.
This podcast is sponsored by dyslexiaproductivitycoaching.com, which helps you organize yourself creatively with a productivity system for Apple devices. So right now, what would a typical student with dyslexia kind of get if they went to the DSA? Could you give us an idea of what the process is like for students? So some people might be intrigued and might have a child who's going to university, or they may be a person who's at university and this is the first time they've heard about it. What technologies do they tend to get when going to university?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So this is where it's kind of grown over the last few years and in a fantastic way. So historically, students would have tended to receive what's colloquially known as text-to-speech software, which is a complete understatement. These are literacy support solutions that do so much more. You can change font sizes, background colors, you can highlight, you can have dynamic reading. There's so much functionality built into these things. OCR software
basically reads it out for you.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So you can grab electronic documents and have them read out to you, or created an audio file so that instead of having the effort of reading, you can listen to it and, through your headphones while you're on the bus or while you're walking to college, or, if that's just whilst you're at your desk, your favorite way of taking in information, and you can speed it up, slow it down. You can dynamically link that to the text if you can see it on your screen. So you can check spellings or, like the source to understand what these words mean. As I say, you can change, depending on your condition, the size of the font, the type of font, the color of the font, the background to the font, the spacing between words, between letters. There's so many amazing tools built into this. And you can capture hard copy. So if you're in the library, you can take a photo with your phone. You can use optical character recognition software that'll capture all of the text, turn it into digital formats, and then you can manipulate it and use it as you see fit. So yeah, there's some fantastic solutions out there on that, and they're growing all the time through the advent of AI and the internet and everything else that's out there. So yeah, like I say, known as text to speech, but I always believe that does it a disservice. These are, fantastic literacy solutions. That's probably one of the main aspects. The other two, I would say, is mind mapping, a phenomenal tool. I can survive without doing mind mapping. It's just my personal sort of way of thinking, to be able to sort of get my ideas down, to move them about, to expand on them, to rearrange them, to prioritize them. Mind mapping to me is one of my transformative sort of solutions that helps my life. So couldn't say enough about that. And then being able to export from it and say, brainstorm all your ideas for your dissertation or your essay, your presentation. So then export it into the right format to give you that structure. You can then flesh it out and do all those good things. So yeah, mind mapping, I would say, yeah, that is just phenomenal within that sector. And then you get into things like speech to text. So being able to dictate to your computer. Dragon is the one that everybody knows these days. But, and in terms of being able to control your computer, so you can tell it to wake up, open particular products, search for images of Clint Eastwood, whatever you want to do. Again, if you struggle to use a keyboard for whatever reason, those are fantastic. And again, it takes, or it doesn't take the effort away, but it minimizes the effort of trying to get your ideas down, and it speeds up the process of getting your thoughts out of your head and onto the page or into your document, which makes a huge difference to a lot of people. So yeah, we sort of get into those, and then note-taking solutions are been around for maybe 10 plus years, but have grown significantly. And the basic idea of capturing notes has been around for a very long time. Audio recording. I remember way back to the start of my career, in AT, we were using dictaphones, and literally it would be turn up to lecture with a microphone, a dictaphone, and record it. But then you've got to go back, you've got to play it back, you've got to work out which bits you wanted. Okay, index marks helped. That moved on to mini disc recorders. I don't know how many people remember those, but they were sort of short-lived for a couple of years, but did a great job. Still got one somewhere. And that then moved on to digital voice recorders, which give a lot more functionality. But again, you were kind of always stuck with that situation where you still had to go back and listen to everything you'd recorded, effectively doubling your working time. If you recorded an hour lecture, you've got an hour recording to work through. But the formats that they now give out and how you interact with your recording have grown significantly. Obviously, sort of transcription has made a big difference so that you've got that transcript, but you still got to read the whole thing to pick out the bits you need. So being able to identify the outputs of a lecture, linking it to the slides, linking sort of, how you then interact with that, and how you engage with what you've captured and what's important, what's urgent, what needs actioning, what do I need to dive deeper into, are all important things. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this as part of this podcast, but that was the inspirational moment for working with Ivy Notes. Mapping, as I've already said, is one of my passions. So seeing the recordings being presented in such a way that you could then manipulate them, because lectures are rarely linear, they go to and fro, there are questions asked, to be able to manipulate that as a mind map, having it transcribed, for me was, a real light bulb moment. And that's what I love about this industry.
Yeah, you've kind of seen that, like Ivy, of course you can talk about Ivy Notes. And I think this isn't just like an Ivy Notes infomercial or anything like that. I really want to sort of get the understanding of the assistive technology landscape. It's fascinating to hear that transformation from, you've got the physical recorder happening, and you've got those timestamps you can put in. And I remember doing that. And
Yes.
they are transformative. I mean, because a lot of the time as a student, you go into that lecture and that's your one chance to experience that lecturer and that content. Yes,
Yep.
you can read up on it, but ironically, the best place for someone with dyslexia or ADHD is to hear it, to experience it socially and communally, and to have that interactive questions. And you've got something visual at the same time, you've got something personal, you've got something auditory.
Yep.
And sometimes actually writing notes while you're hearing and doing all of that is quite helpful, because you can hear it and then you can write some notes down, rather than read a book and then look at your notes and write it down, read a book and look at your notes. Yep. However, it all happens so fast that it can get you so stressed that you just flip into transcription mode, and all you do is write every single word that you hear because you're scared you're going to miss anything.
Yeah.
And you just lose out on the whole experience completely, because you kind of blank out. You're not even comprehending the subject a lot of the time. You just become this, transcription machine.
Oh,
or you go to the other extreme where you go, oh, I can't cope with writing forever, and I'm just going to sit and understand this.
Yeah.
And I think there's this combination of, you need to understand the subject and you need to remember part of the subject. And it's normally like 95% understand and 5% memorize. But without notes, you can't remember. And so that audio recording was really a lot of tension and anxiety and so on, that you knew you've got that as a backup.
100%. And I think note taking, whether it's in a lecture, a tutorial, a meeting, whatever the environment, is vastly underestimated in terms of its complexity. I think, you're listening to what's being said, you're processing it to decide whether that's valid. You're condensing it down into what you can jot down within your notes, because you can't write it all verbatim. And then you're actually writing what you've decided to write, but you're still listening to the next thing that's being said and the next slide that's coming up. So that constant sort of process of analysis, of writing and listening is huge and not to be underestimated. And I'll just touch on, you mentioned sort of, using the seeing it, hearing it, the whole experience of it. My colleague Mary very often refers to the multimodal way of learning, so that you are sort of engaging all aspects of, the way your brain works to build those memories and to, lock that into long-term memory, short-term memory and understanding. So yeah, that's, like I say, for me, sort of, being able to see it as a mind map and having the transcription and the audio, that multimodal sort of input for me. Yeah, fantastic.
Yes. And it's only been possible in the last couple of years because of AI.
Yes.
AI's made that possible, because up until then, like, the pinnacle of kind of this note-taking was something like Glean or Jamworks, where you've got that audio recording.
Yep.
You can highlight key sections in the audio so that you've got like a highlight mark that goes back to that section in the audio, and you can type some notes over the top of the audio. So your notes and the audio and so on. Could you describe what you've seen as the evolution of that? Because you've kind of seen that unfold over time. What have you seen as the sort of evolution of this note-taking? It's been fascinating to see.
Yeah, it's, as I say, obviously going way back when everybody was just sort of busy writing their notes and trying to capture everything they could. That's then progressed into the audio capture. But that raised those, as we said, sort of, the obvious challenge of what do you do with that audio recording? Very easily double your workload, if not more so, because you're probably trying to transcribe and write notes. You've probably paused your recorder whilst you do that. So you're not listening to it an hour's worth. You're probably listening to an hour and a half because you've been pausing and writing and going back. So yes, it's a great benefit, but it also creates additional work. The guys at Glean, Roger and David, they had a fantastic idea when they came up with that solution, Audio Note Taker, as it was known by Sonosant, by giving a real-time representation of the software, so that instead of necessarily scribbling notes, you were seeing a chunk of information, chunk of audio, and you could code it as you were going. So you'd see the lecturer would say something about their holiday, in which case you could very easily sort of with hotkeys just go, that's irrelevant, I don't care about that, and you mark it as not of interest. You would hear something, you think, I need to research that. You would hit another key and you would then know, I need to listen to that and I need to go and do some research. Or this has been mentioned for the exam, I color code it for that. And it just gave a much more interactive way so that you could focus on what was being said, as you said, and understanding and taking in the information whilst knowing you were capturing the audio and what you were going to do with that audio, which was great. And then, as you say, as AI has come along and the audio can now be turned into a transcript to a greater or lesser degree. We also show my slight ignorance on this point. I'm not sure how we are with multi-speaker recognition these days. I know it's possible, but it's something that's developing. But, the latest sort of development, I think, say inspirational for me, that sort of capturing the audio, you're listening to it in real time within the lecture, but having that visual representation as a mind map so you can, click, amend, add, this sort of, interact with the recording as it's being transcribed, and then having the transcription for later sort of attention. I think sort of, pulls all of that together in an amazing way. There's always been a question, and it's never really been well solved, around lecture capture. And that's probably the other one just to mention. So a lot of universities went through a phase of installing lecture capture, which was a literal video and audio capture of the lecture. There were problems around that. A lot of lecturers didn't like to release the recordings. They didn't necessarily want their IP out there in the big wide world. Or there may have been concerns over people taking the audio recording and manipulating it, or whatever the problem may be. But there were many problems around it. The other big problem with it was it only existed in the main lecture theatres. It rarely existed in the smaller lecture theatres. Certainly didn't exist in the tutorials or on the sort of, the other sort of in the library or any other opportunities for learning. So yeah, it's okay, but it's no substitute for a personal sort of recording that you've interacted with and understood. I think that far and away that is the most important way of doing it.
Yeah. So what you're basically describing is the institution said, look, don't worry about it. We'll do it for you and we'll provide it for you. But it becomes very patchy that way.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas if you've got your own mode of capturing notes, you can
Yeah.
take personal responsibility for it and ensure that you've got full coverage.
100%. And whether you are, if you haven't captured it yourself, you're relying on a friend, a colleague, a fellow student, or the university, there can be days or weeks before you get your copy of the recording.
Yes.
You need it whilst it's fresh. That's one of the key things with the note taking is whilst it's still fresh in your memories, when you really want to sort of review that, engage with it, and properly learn it. So yeah, you don't want to delay.
Yeah, you really want to review that information within 24 hours before you start losing it. Yes, it's fascinating to see how it's developed. So at the moment, students are they go to a DSA assessment and the assessor finds out what kind of challenges they've got, dyslexia, ADHD, vision, whatever. And then they get recommended a range of different options. And it's often, do they still get given computers nowadays?
They do. So there's slight difference across the home countries on that one. If you're in, I believe it's still the case. If you're a Welsh student, you still get the computer paid for in full. If you're an English student, you make a contribution. I think it was £200 contribution towards the cost of the computers. Because as times moved on, say when this all started, having a computer at home was, that was revolutionary.
Yes.
Whereas now, I think, pretty much no student is going to attend university without a computer. So it's, in terms of level playing fields, it's fair and reasonable. So yeah, and I think just to mention on the disabled students assessment, I think the thing that I've always really valued within that is that it is a needs-based assessment. So they don't say, right, this is your condition, these are the tools you need. They talk to the individuals, and it's an individual assessment every time, and explore where do you struggle, where have you got your challenges, where can you be supported using the assistive technology that's out there, and those recommendations made accordingly. It's not a one size fits all. We're all different. We all have our different ways of thinking, of working, and the challenges our conditions present. And yeah, that is the particularly valuable part about it. I think it's based on you, not just your label.
It's really remarkable. And what they do is they set you up for the whole course, don't they? It's not just every year they do it. It's just like, no, let's set you up for the whole course. And they give you the subscription to the software for the whole course, don't they?
Yes.
So you've got it. You don't just start using it and then a year later or whatever, you've got to pay for it yourself. It's like, no, we're going to cover it for the whole thing, which is fantastic.
Yeah. I think in probably 99% of all software cases, there's maybe one or two that are particularly specialist for some conditions, but in 99% of it, they are course-long licenses. And as I say, sort of the training is there to help you learn how to best use the software. There are fantastic e-learning packages because I remember when I was a student, I definitely didn't work 9 till 5. I was working at 10 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock in the morning, all those other times when you're not going to be able to get hold of your AT trainer or your support tutor or whoever it may be, and you've got to find a solution. And knowing that you have an e-learning solution for your assistive technology is also incredibly important because, if you're struggling to write an essay, where do I start? You can go into these packages and they'll give you a pointer and say, well, you could use your mind mapping to help you build a structure. You could use text to speech to help get your ideas down. And it's just that sort of getting over that hurdle that is incredibly key. But the warranty, the support, the insurance, is all for the duration of your course.
Right. And that's the sort of information that you're not necessarily going to find on YouTube, is it?
No. It's something that as a sector we have tried to promote. We try and work with the universities to make sure that they're aware of it, because historically there was a time that not all universities were aware of how that could help students. But it's still down to the students to engage with the process and to sort of follow that through. And there are some fantastic parents and disability officers out there who will guide you through it. But yeah, each time it's a new sort of adventure, and but yeah, I couldn't recommend it highly enough. And I've long sort of promoted it to all of our networks. It's incredibly valuable.
So what advice would you give to, with all your years of assistive technology experience, to a student who's starting out their university degree just now and they're thinking about DSA and they're thinking, is it worth it? I'll just kind of get by with what I've been using
Yeah.
so far. People with dyslexia, we're often allergic to forms and administration
Yes.
and
Yes.
all these processes like, it's just easier just to do it
Yeah.
myself and do it my own way. What sort of
Yeah.
advice would you give to them to navigate, to get into this process and to navigate this process?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a very, very common scenario you describe. I think, as we mentioned earlier, I think most students who've made it as far as university have developed their own sort of coping strategies and their own sort of methods of working that have got them to where they are. And, generally it worked very, very hard to do so. My advice is 100% to, if you just Google the Disabled Students Allowance, you will immediately find links. Follow the ones on the Student Loans Company for England and Wales, or the Northern Ireland Library Boards, or the Scottish Award System, or just contact your disability office at your university, who will guide you through the whole process. It is, I wouldn't say it's painless, because you do have to provide some information. You do have to put a certain amount of effort into it. You don't get, we're talking young adults, so you don't get your sort of your hand held all the way through and everything done for you. But it is a very straightforward process to apply for. It's not painful. As straightforward, I think, as it can be these days for an individual to do. But the rewards and the benefits are enormous. To discover the things that when you've developed your own coping strategies, you've done what you've thought of. But there's a whole wealth of knowledge and background and information out there. And, the needs assessors themselves are very well trained, very experienced, and have, a huge bank of knowledge available to them. So the things that to be recommended and requested to help you with your studies are significant, and I could not recommend it highly enough. Worst case scenario, you come out the other end maybe having a better idea of where your challenges are. Best case, you will come out the other side with a suite of support that will enable you to be more effective, more efficient, more organized, and less exhausted. That's always the one for me. We don't talk enough about sort of student mental health and burnout and those sort of things sometimes. But when you are working at the higher rate, already studying a very difficult degree, self-care is just as important as any of the rest of it. So yeah, for that, I could not recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, because sometimes with dyslexia, you can often think, well, dyslexia is just about reading and I can read. And most people who have got to the university stage, they can read. But actually, when you think about it, dyslexia isn't just about reading. Dyslexia is a processing difference that shows up as a reading difficulty first,
Yep.
but it also shows up as a writing difficulty. Writing essays can be a challenge.
Absolutely.
Taking notes in lectures can be challenging. Remembering things, memorizing things for tests, multiple
Yep.
choice exams can be challenging. There's a
Yes.
whole range of different, moments where that processing difference shows up. And it's a huge advantage in the problem-solving world of the workplace, but it can be a real disadvantage in the sort of very systematic world of academia. And there's solutions to each one of them. And I think when you realize that dyslexia shows up in processes, when you have to deal with a process, you start realizing it's really helpful to have those things that you don't know what you don't know. Like when you go into that assessor interview, you don't know what you don't know. And they go, what's your note taking like? And you go, oh, well, I'm not very good at note taking. Well, that could be because of your dyslexia. And you're like, oh gosh, I hadn't realized that. And a lot of people haven't done two and two together. They just think they're bad at note taking and they don't realize it's connected to dyslexia, or they're really not very good at writing an essay and they don't realize it's part of dyslexia. It's disconnected. And I've experienced this with so many students and adults where they go, really? That's connected? Those are part of the same thing? And you're like, yeah, it's all part of the same thing.
Yep.
It's a revelation. And it's also a revelation, all those different strategies. And I think The assistive technologies, just one part of the jigsaw. You mentioned like study skills tutors
Yes.
as well. And so, they don't just give you assistive technology, they'll give you like a study skills tutor to meet
Yep.
up with once a week or, 2 or 3 times a week, depending on whether you're coming up to a big essay deadline or something like that. And they'll help you structure and organize. And often they'll help you use the technology you've got to solve that particular problem. So you get really equipped.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think just to mention on top of sort of some of the challenges you mentioned, that focus and distraction management, these are things that, very often sort of people with neurodiverse conditions struggle with. The sort of the vision on organization of your notes, of your timetable, of everything else. These are all things that, as time's gone on and the AT has spread, I mentioned just a couple, but there are revision tools now, there are presentation tools, there are distraction management tools, there are focus aids. There are so many ways that assistive technology has spread and moved, helping people type, predictive typing. We always think of, okay, I do, but I'm old. When I think predictive typing, I think back in the days when we used to use just the sort of 10-button keypad on the phone. They would recommend or suggest one word at a time. You've now got really intelligent text prediction solutions that'll recommend, 20 odd words. But they learn from you. It's the whole AI thing we sort of touched on briefly earlier, but that's a big one at the moment. And that is changing a lot of assistive technology and a lot of the way that students are working. And there's a lot of questions that are being discussed and asked around AI. And you mentioned support. I had a great conversation at ATIA a few months ago with somebody who's developing an AI support tool so that, when you are in that crisis moment at 3 a.m., you haven't necessarily got a person to speak to, but you can sort of go to your AI personal assistants and say, oh my God, I've had enough. Or whatever it is. And they say, okay, take a moment, have a break, go for a walk, maybe not 3 o'clock in the morning, but, whatever the recommendation is. And, just, you're never going to replace a real person with this stuff. But in a moment of crisis, when you need something, it can at least then guide you through and help you to, is it just that sort of brain freeze moment? So you just need sort of a bit of support getting through? Or is this a real sort of moment of crisis, in which case you need to speak to your parents, you need to speak to, a professional, you need to do whatever needs to be done, and helping to sort of, guide you through those processes. And again, when it comes to AI, we see a lot of this at the moment with writing solutions and AI, or getting AI to create your essays, and ethical use of AI with replicating people's voices and all sorts of things. It's a big, big question. There is a huge amount of opportunity in there, though. And I think the balance is what we need to find with AI to understand sort of, where it is acting as a support and maybe helping you to sort of fill those gaps in your repertoire or your skill set, or just where you struggle with the challenge, versus doing the work for you. That's the sort of the edge that we're walking at the moment. And I think as long as it's helping you as the individual to do what you need to do in your way, then I think we're the right side of that. I think if it's doing it for you, then we're probably sort of, going the opposite direction. We're not really doing what we're there at university to do. What's the point in sort of using the AI to do all your work for you if you haven't learned, if you haven't engaged, you haven't developed your skills? So some interesting questions around that.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges that I've had with designing IVI is how much of a summary of the lecture do you give? Because there are transcription softwares, meeting transcription softwares, which will record the meeting, the audio, do the transcript of the meeting, and then give you an AI summary of all the important things that were covered with action points, etc. Now, first of all, for someone with dyslexia, they're like, I just don't want to read another thing, even if it is a summary of a whole transcript.
Yeah.
Just why it's really nice to see it in a mind map instead of as a linear list. But then there's the challenge of who's deciding what's important. And I think just taking that example of note taking, if you abdicate that responsibility to the AI to decide what's important, what happens is that you get this summary that seems so comprehensive, so professional, so complete. But actually, when you go through it, I've done this in the past, and I've when I mind map it, for example, it's a strange way of doing it. So there's this function within Ivy where you can take a piece of text and you can click magic map and it just maps the whole thing for you as a mind map instantly. And you've got the text to the side and you've got the mind map. What you can notice is often if you get given a summary, the AI skips over quite a few important things. And it's not always choosing what's important. It's choosing a lot of
Yeah.
important things,
Yeah.
not everything that you might think is important. Often
Yeah.
that human judgment to say, actually, this is really quite important. This is not obviously important, but it is important, is very valuable in meetings. And I don't think that's been solved yet. And I think that's where this function, we talked about it in Glean, starting this off with you tap a button and it highlights a piece of text and colors it. That's a blue piece of text for the and it and not text, but
Audio chunk. Yeah.
so it becomes you color bits of the audio section that you go in and focus in on and re-listen to and so on.
Yep.
We've got a similar function within Ivy where you tap highlight and it highlights that chunk of audio and a chunk of text, and also in the mind map highlights that branch.
Yep.
But what we're going to do next is when you highlight that piece of text, it copies it and pastes it into the mind map as a note.
Nice.
So you start to summarize and you have all the quotes put in, and then it changes the shape of the mind map. If you have hit highlight and you think that's important, it will prioritize it in the map. So Ivy will say, right, if they think that's important, I'll prioritize that in the map. And gradually the map changes according to your priorities. So what we're thinking is that if people keep tapping highlight, maybe do it 10, 15, 20, 30 times in a lecture, then what happens is their mind map actually becomes a representation of what they think is important. And they're interacting with it and going in there and editing it and so on. I think there's something really important about this human interaction that has to happen with AI for it to be properly steered. It's like they're the manager of the information and we're the executive and we're working together, or they're the technician and we're the manager or executive. So there's this collaboration rather than just handing it over and say, do a summary for me, would you?
Yeah, I can agree more. I think it's how we use the AI, and if we are deferring all our decisions to the AI to decide what's important, what's crucial, what should be, put into the essay, what's, needs to be learned, ready for an exam, whatever it may be. And it's caused an interesting skew as well. So there has been in recent years a move towards, away from exams, because, that 3-hour exam is not necessarily a good representation of how well you understand your subject. Some people love exams, some people hate exams. So there's been more of a move to, the evaluation of coursework and sort of, assessments throughout the entire sort of duration of your degree. But we're now seeing, because of AI, a move away from that, because there's less of a confidence that that is your work, back to exams, because we know you're shut in a room for 3 hours and whatever you put down is what you know, not what the AI thinks.
Yes.
It's having some interesting sort of, other consequences at the moment.
And that has a knock-on consequence on people with dyslexia, because often people with dyslexia find coursework much more manageable because they can take their time, they can work through it, they can get feedback, they can do a final submission, whereas the exam doesn't really suit itself to dyslexic process.
Absolutely.
So ironically, AI, which is often so helpful with dyslexia now, is now pushing us, into the exams, which is so unhelpful. In Scotland, we've got the Curriculum for Excellence, and it's an unusual curriculum that was created, I think, about 15 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago. And I think it's going to be transformative worldwide, actually. It's quite forward thinking. Anyway, one of the exams that it has is an English exam, which is a hybrid between coursework and a hybrid between an exam. Okay. So what happens is, for your English equivalent of GCSE, 30% of the mark goes towards a piece of coursework that you practice for beforehand
Yeah.
by writing an essay, and then you have to bring in your notes and rewrite the essay in exam conditions.
Right.
So it's like an essay that you submitted before, but
Yeah.
you then go and rewrite it in exam conditions. So
Okay.
no one has kind of helped you. Do you see what I mean? It
Yes,
creates-
yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. That's a great approach.
And it's quite interesting because what they do is they allow you to take 150 words in as notes.
Right.
So you're allowed to take in quotes,
No.
key ideas,
Yeah.
structure of your essay, whatever, in those 150 words.
Yeah.
What's funny is that most people, when they write 150 words, it's not a lot of words. That's like
Yo.
half a paragraph, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's a real challenge, but you can take it in as a mind map. Now,
Okay.
a mind map of 150 words is a lot more valuable than half a paragraph of text because you've got the order of the branches of
Yes.
individual keywords, etc.
Yeah. About hierarchy, everything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can just walk in with a mind map of 150 words and you can just write your whole essay out from that mind map. So I think actually mind maps are going to be really helpful in this process of dealing with AI. I find the ability, so when you get given a piece of text by AI or a whole output, sometimes I like to ask it to instantly mind map it for me in it. And I get a mind map of it and the original text combined. So I'm like, right, I've got the picture. I can see the pattern. I can see the structure. I can see go into the detail if I need to, move it around, reorganize it. And then what happens is if I then talked out from that mind map and transcribed my thoughts on my way of speaking out and explaining that outline, it would be quite different from the original source. It's got the structure, but you've extracted it from the original wording and you've just got the structure and pattern and the key words. And when you put it into your own words, it's again unique. So I think that there's this opportunity with mind mapping to partner with AI in that AI is getting you some part of the way, the mind map deconstructs it, distills it, and then you get given that space to put it into your own words.
Yeah, I think, again, for me, first of all, say you're absolutely right. I think if the AI is supporting that cognitive load and taking some of the strain away, that has got to be a good thing. And I think that's the danger I see. Sort of, some universities have already sort of come out and said, right, AI, nothing. We're not engaging with AI. We will not have that. Will not form part of our work. Whereas other universities have said, genie's out the bottle. Use it however you sort of, see fit. And I think there has to be a middle ground. I think we're just in that sort of learning curve at the moment. And very much like, when the internet and Google first came around and everything else and how that was used and plagiarism and, whatever it may be. But, we learned from that. We understood how to use it. And I think that's the next step with AI is, we're on that learning curve at the moment to understand where it is appropriate usage and where it sort of oversteps the grounds. So it's going to be an interesting couple of years, I think, to understand that.
Yeah. Okay. So wrapping this all up, in conclusion, please go apply for Disability Students Allowance.
Yeah, I think if anybody has got this far and listened to me for this long, then the Disabled Students Allowance is fantastic. It really is an amazing transformative scheme that will help so many people, and you lose nothing by going for it. You don't get charged to go for an assessment. You don't get charged to apply for it. So please go for it. And the help is there. It is not sort of insurmountable. I'd just say to follow on from that is for anybody who's benefited from the Disabled Students Allowance is also to look at access to work in terms of going into the workplace as well. It works in a slightly different way, but it is an equally valuable scheme. This is something that's bugged me for a long time, but I will just say there is a complete disconnect between the number of students who go through DSA and the number of working age adults who go through access to work. And that's never one we've managed to sort of effectively unpick, either as BATA or individuals or anything else. But so in whichever environment you're in, you will benefit from assistive technology. And, we are who we are and we use the things we use. I wear glasses, this is what I do. I would feel no more embarrassment about wearing glasses than using assistive technology or a hearing aid or anything else. This is who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that analogy of putting on your glasses is so important. It's like you can get away with not having your glasses on, squinting away, walking up to the blackboard, faking it, copying
Yep.
someone else's work. Once they've read it, you can do all of these hacks, but just put your glasses on,
Yeah.
Anthony, and you can see the board and write it yourself, and the independence that it gives you as well. I
Yes.
think that's so one of the two big benefits is less energy, less cognitive load and exhaustion. And secondly, more independence, because ironically, without this assistive technology, often you become very dependent on, oh, I'm going to use my friend's notes,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
I'm going to ask my mum to help me write this essay, or
Yep.
that's fine for a period of time, but gradually these can be replaced by a good piece of assistive technology or
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back to the commentary earlier that 24/7 availability of AT is huge. You
Yes.
can't always, phone your classmate or your parent or your boss at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to get a piece of work done. But your AT is there. And if you know how to use it, that is going to save you an awful lot of time and energy and stress and anxiety. Yeah. Couldn't recommend it highly enough. It's, makes it
Yeah.
all.
It's fascinating looking at the numbers. We've got 3 million students in the UK. We know that 10% of them have got dyslexia. So that's 300,000 students.
Yeah.
Only 58,000 students apply for disability students allowance in a given year.
Yeah.
Now, some of them of those 300,000 may have had it in the year before, but only let's say 1/3 of them are going for the disability students allowance. That's still 2/3 who are not going for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And part of the reasons are people don't know about this DSA,
Yep.
but another reason is they often don't know about their dyslexia. And often it's at the university stage that they discover their dyslexia. And so I highly recommend doing a dyslexia screener of some sort, speaking to someone about dyslexia
Yeah.
and pursuing the dyslexia side, because I know from my own experience when I was 35, I thought to myself, I might be slightly dyslexic.
Mm.
And when I went to university a second time, I got an assessment done. And she said, no, you're not slightly dyslexic. You're moderately dyslexic. You're not extremely dyslexic, but you're
Yep.
moderately dyslexic, which basically means slightly means it hardly has any effect on you, but moderately means it has an effect on you, but you don't
Yep.
see it. And you think you can get away with it,
Yep.
but you're not getting away with it at uni. And that's kind of often
Yeah.
the most awkward spot. If you're
Yeah.
extremely dyslexic, you're kind of like, I can't function without
Yeah.
AT. Whereas some people who can get away with it are actually in a harder situation because they're using way too much energy to achieve basic tasks,
Yeah.
not getting to their full potential.
Absolutely. We see so many students who, in both those examples, either have they know they've got dyslexia, but they've struggled on until their second year, even third year before getting help. But also those students who, through conversation with peers or through what they've read or through advice from a friend or colleague, whatever it may be, get exactly that piece of advice of, maybe you should check this. Hey, one great thing about apprenticeships, you're automatically screened if you do an apprenticeship. And I think,
Really?
yes, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And that is a big thing. So, yeah, I mean, for sixth form, for higher education, further education, I do think that, if there were the opportunity to, for everybody to go through screening to just understand themselves would be a fantastic thing.
And a screener only takes 5 or 10 minutes to, yeah.
Yep. It's inexpensive. It's quick. Yeah.
And one of the best screeners is turning to your pals and saying, do you think I've got dyslexia? And the amount of people who go, yeah.
Yeah.
You go, why do you say that? Oh, well, the way you say these words and the way you
Yeah.
mix this up and the way you spell and the way you text me your texts and
Yeah.
the way you do this and that, I think you probably got dyslexia. And often you're the last person to know.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Yeah.
Well, Anthony, any final words before we sign off? That's been great.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Darius. Thank you for inviting me. Really kind. No, I suppose for me, I love what I do. I've been doing it for a long time now, and every day is interesting and different. And I very much look forward to seeing how the next 25 years go as far as this industry goes. It's fascinating, it's rewarding, it's enjoyable, and yeah, it's an absolute pleasure for me. So thank you, Darius. Really appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you for being that sort of kind tech support in a way, because you're in some way, somebody might view you as tech support, as it were,
Yep.
get this working on my computer and so forth. In that there must be thousands of students that you have helped quiet
Yeah.
background, being that tipping point where they've got that technology that's often made the difference between whether they've passed their degree or not. Because there's some people who manage to second year and then they get to third year and the weight is too much, the battling that headwind's too much, and then they just sort of fade away and don't
Yeah.
even do their final years. I know
Yeah.
that was partly my experience in a law degree, and I had to fade away and then come back two
Yeah.
years later and refinish my degree once I was fully equipped. So
No,
thank
it's true.
you.
Yeah, I hope we've made a difference. Everybody in this industry that I ever meet is so dedicated and so sort of proactive in what they do. And yeah, if we've made a difference, then that's a good day.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you, Darius. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
See ya. This podcast is sponsored by dyslexiaproductivitycoaching.com. It's my day job when I'm not hosting this podcast. Tell me, do you know what you want to achieve in the workplace, but you're struggling with how to achieve it? Maybe you suspect some traits of dyslexia are getting in the way. Well, that's where Dyslexia Productivity Coaching comes in, because we give you a simple productivity system for your Apple devices that harnesses the creativity that comes with your dyslexia. It includes proven methods like note-taking, reminders, speech-to-text, mind mapping, and more, all tailored to your needs. It'll free up your time and help you achieve outstanding results. Book a complimentary call to discuss it with me, and if you do it soon, I may also be available to coach you personally via Zoom. So don't be shy, go to dyslexiaproductivitycoaching.com or swipe up and book it now.